Good evening and welcome to the Spotlight. My name is Levi Kores. Now, 20 years ago, on the 7th of August, which is just tomorrow, we woke up to, not really woke up to, but on the morning of the 7th, about 10:30 or so, a bomb went off right at Haile Selassie Road, just about near the Cooperative Bank. Cooperative Bank still stands today, but next to it is a memorial center. That bomb took down the American embassy that was right there, and a house that was just next to it that was called the Ufundi building. With us is a gentleman who was there on that date, who was affected by that blast, who lost his eyesight in that process, and who is doing amazing things post that blast. His name is Douglas Sidialo. Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
And we will come to more of what you do. But let's start with the morning of that day. It's now 20 years ago. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
What happened that day?
August 7th, 1998 was a bright Friday morning, and I was going down to work from Uhuru Highway. I joined Haile Selassie Avenue, and we came down towards Ex-Telecom building.
Mm-hmm. You were driving?
Yes, and then there was a huge traffic snarl-up as we came down towards the Cooperative House. Mm-hmm. Then when we reached just after the Cooperative House, I saw this truck that took a turn and went towards the American Embassy gates. Then I witnessed an altercation between the occupants of this truck and the security personnel from the embassy. Then I heard what I thought were gunshots being thrown at the embassy, but eventually I was told they were hand grenades. Mm-hmm. And what came to mind was that these were about gangsters or robbers that wanted to rob or steal from the embassy. Mm-hmm. It never occurred to me that actually they were terrorists. Then I saw a man run from the scene of the shooting with a walkie-talkie on his right hand towards the heavy traffic. Mm-hmm. And that's when the huge blast went. And from that day, I have never seen or witnessed light of day again. I became blind. I was rescued from the scene of the accident and taken to Kenyatta National Referral Hospital, mm-hmm. where Kenyan doctors and German surgeons who have flown in tried their very, very best to save my sight. But 2 months later, I was discharged. And in fact, the doctor in charge, the late Dr. Gondi, told me, Douglas, after 6 months, you'll regain your sight. But I've been waiting for that miracle to happen for the last 20 years. Mm.
Well, when the blasts happened, right at that moment, and now just after the aftermath, you're hearing a lot of noise, there's people around you, people are screaming probably, some are maimed and wounded. Did you imagine that you had lost your sight for good? Did you have other injuries as well?
I think I was unconscious. And because I was unconscious, I was like half dead. Mm-hmm. So I could hear noises around me, but as time went by, when I reached the hospital, I was like just gone. Mm-hmm. It was not until after 2 days that I regained consciousness. Mm. So when I regained consciousness, my face was bandaged. And still, there were people actually wailing and crying, and somehow I started wondering what had happened. Mm. So I started hearing stories actually at the hospital that there had been a huge blast in Nairobi, and so many people had been killed, so many had been injured, others had been maimed, and many others' life had changed just but forever.
Yep.
So I imagined that when the bandages are removed from my face, I would be able to see again.
Yes.
Because I was just about jovial, humorous, I could talk to people, you know. It never occurred to me that actually I was completely blind.
Wow, wow. How did you cope with that going forward?
Well, when I got discharged, you know, first I believed that my doctor's observation that I'll be able to see again. But then my wife was working almost 600 kilometers away, came to see me in the hospital. And then when she came to see me away, when she got about the news, when she was going through my medical report, she discovered that it was written that the retina of my left eye was totally eviscerated, and my right eye was completely damaged. So chances of eye seeing again were very, very minimal. So when it dawned upon me that actually I was blind, I was very much devastated. I was a very bitter man.
I can imagine.
In fact, if I imagine that if I would have met the men behind that heinous and barbaric act of cowardice, I would have skinned them alive so that they could feel and experience the pain we are going through, because it was quite devastating. But down the line, I realized that bitterness and anger only but retards healing. As a Christian, and with profound faith, I felt I should just but move on. So I accept my blindness as a challenge and started moving on.
Yes.
Through courage, resilience, prayer, and profound confidence, through my rehabilitation, sports, and adventure. First, after the accident, I was taken to Machakos Training College for the Blind.
Yes.
To learn how to live again as a blind person. Orientation and mobility, independent living skills, and even how to cook and just live again.
Yes.
And then the International Development Research Center, which is a Canadian agency, gave in some money to the Kenya Society for the Blind to start a computer training program for those who had been blinded by the bombing. And I was the first recipient of that program.
Wow.
But then after that again, after that training in Kenya, after the September 11 attacks in New York and the World Trade Center,
yes,
because at the hospital we actually we organized ourselves as victims after we got discharged, and formed an association to champion for the plight of the victims and with the orphans, the widows, the survivors, and all those whose life had changed forever. And
Yes.
I actually became their spokesperson and their vice chairman. So most organizations in the States got to know about me. So after the September 11 attacks, you know, the same organization that had been working with me, like Church World Service,
yes,
and Eastern Mennonite University in Harrisonburg, Virginia, organized a seminar on strategies on trauma awareness and resilience. And I got the invitation to be their first guest speaker in that conference, which brought together religious leaders and congregations affected by 9/11 attacks. And during that time, I was the first victim of terrorism to lay a wreath at the Pentagon at the River Street entrance, basically in honor of the 9/11 families.
yes,
So as a result of that, this university chose to offer me a scholarship to do conflict and justice studies. And then they organized for me to go for rehabilitation at the Virginia Rehab Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And while at that rehab center, my world just opened up completely as a blind person.
What happened? What did you see?
Yeah, well, what I mean there is that there were so much things in the center
Yes.
that you don't get in Africa. I could, like, they had a nice gym with all the state-of-the-art equipment.
Yes.
Had a swimming pool which was warm. And, you know, most American men and women could eat because there was so much good food there. Chicken and basically anything you talk, like saying in a six-star hotel.
Yes.
So the Americans could wake up in the morning and eat and sleep and just waste their life away. But because I was from Africa,
Yes.
I took advantage of that and got the best out of the rehabilitation, using the gym, using their bicycles. And then eventually I got this invitation to do a bike ride from Ground Zero in New York
Yes.
to the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. That was the first time
That's a big distance.
I did, yeah, actually it's 500 kilometers
Yeah.
in 3 days. And I was riding with people like Glenn Lamont, you know, some of the Tour de France champions.
Yes.
And some friends of mine from who are friends of Lance Armstrong. So we did ride with them from ground zero to the Pentagon. And by the time, actually I was also riding with the brother of the second pilot, the brother of the second, of the pilot of the second plane that crashed at the World Trade Center.
Yes, the
So
United Airlines.
yes, and firefighters, family members, and yeah, friends of those who had been affected. So when I reached actually Washington, D.C., my hands were numb, my legs were sore, and my bottom was like almost being ripped apart.
I can imagine.
I never imagined I would ever ride on a bicycle again. But that served to be the beginning of my adventure cycling journey.
Yes. They call you the adventure there?
The blind adventurer.
adventurer.
Yes, actually I've been a blind adventurer for the last many years.
Yes.
After the bike ride at the Face of America 2002 and 2003, I came on to climb Mount Kilimanjaro with some friends of mine from the States, the one I had met, including Mr. Eric Weinmeier, the first blind person in the world to reach the top of Mount Everest.
Yes.
He's also the first blind man in the world to summit all the highest peaks of the world, all the 7 summits of the world, and yet he's blind.
Tell me about that challenge, Kilimanjaro.
Yeah, so when he came over,
yeah.
actually Eric came over to climb Kilimanjaro with my friend, the current global CEO of Unilever, Sir Paul Polman.
Yes.
So we climbed with Eric, Mount Kilimanjaro, and Sir Paul Polman. And actually it was a very tough experience because we were 8 blind climbers in all.
Wow.
But out of the 8 blind climbers from almost all these, all over the continent, all the 7 continents, only 5 of us reached the top. The top blind climber from Japan, Koichiro Kobayashi, the top blind climber from Europe, Andy Hauser, Eric Weinmeier from America, and Karl Kronberg, also from America. And then I became the first blind person in Africa to actually reach the Uhuru Peak.
Yes.
It was quite a very tough experience, especially climbing. You don't hold on someone. You must trek using your own trekking poles. You use 2 trekking poles.
Yes.
And then you have a guide in front of you who tells you a big stone on the left, a big stone on the right, and then maybe a big jump in between. So someone communicates to you on as you move. So you scan as you move up the mountain.
Wow.
But Mount Kilimanjaro being a freestanding mountain is not that very technical like Mount Kenya. Because if you are to do Mount Kenya, especially to Batiani, you must be a technical rock climbing person. You must train how to do technical rock climbing. So because the mountain is very rugged.
Yes.
But for Mount Kilimanjaro, it's just a freestanding, so you can just walk up to the top. But the final day is not that easy, especially during the Gilmore's Point to Uhuru Peak. And well, out of all these climbers, the final day I happened to have pushed very hard, and I reached the peak as the first person.
Wow.
But then, because there's so much sulfur up Uhuru Peak, because there's a big crater
Yes.
up there emitting a lot of sulfur. So we only stayed there for like 30 minutes. And we came down, you know, we had to start descending down. And I'm telling you, descending down is even more difficult than climbing up. It was very, very tough. Very, very tough indeed. And actually, after that climb, there are 2 things that I did ask my friends to do for me. We founded the Kilimanjaro Blind Trust Africa.
Yes.
A foundation that's helping many blind folks in this continent in unlocking literacy for life, basically in education of the blind. And Sir Paul Polman, who is the current global CEO of Unilever, is the president. And Eric is a honorary ambassador of the trust. And I'm one of the founder members of this trust. Then the second thing that this team of friends of mine helped do is to help me get sponsorship to do a ride of my lifetime, cycling blind all the way from Cairo to Cape Town, covering a distance of 12,000 kilometers in 95 days.
Yes.
I became the first blind person in the world to achieve that feat. In fact, cycling in the Sudan, the Nubia Desert,
Yes.
from Lake Nasser all the way to Dongola and Khartoum, there were no roads. Very, very tough. Cycling actually from Gonda in Ethiopia through Bahada, crossing the Blue Nile Gorge is very tough. In fact, that's when I discovered why Kenyans are beaten by Ethiopians in long distance running.
Why?
I'll tell you the secret someday, not today. When we have another show.
There are a lot of athletes watching,
Yeah, they will want to hear that, but I think we'll have another session where I can tell them why Kenyans sometimes are beaten by Gabriel Selassie and why Tergat never won a marathon and 10,000 meters. We can have a session for that. Now, and then when it comes to riding from Moyale, the meltdown madness, Moyale through Sololo, Marsabit to Isiolo. There were no roads by that time. Very tough. In fact, when after from Sololo to Marsabit, it reached a point when we were going through the Trubi Desert. My pilot could not hold it anymore. He got out of the bike, threw it in the bush, sat on a stone and said, "Douglas, you can pick your bike, pick your sponsors and go with them. I cannot ride anymore." Because it was too much. It was too much for him.
Yeah.
It was too much for him. And I had to use all my persuasive language to convince him to get back on the bike. And in fact, I even told him now that if I was paying you $3,000, I'm going to double it. So if we can finish. Because I could not just imagine that it had been sponsored by the UN, carrying their flag as the UN Habitat Ambassador, and then companies like Nestle Foods, P&G were sponsoring me, and here I am only having done it to Moyale and then giving up, and then not even cross through my country, giving it up in my own country. To me, that was a big devastation, much more than the bombing that I actually succumbed to. So it was such a tough ride, but thank God I was able to finish it in 120 days in Cape Town, the Cape of Good Hope.
In Cape Town.
And I have continued into my adventure cycling. Apart from the Tour d'Afrique, I've done many cycling majors in South Africa. In fact, I'm much of a celebrity in South Africa. Like whenever I'm riding in South Africa, I get big dancers, those who dance for Zuma, who used to dance for Zuma, they dance for me because they see me as someone who has made a huge achievement.
Yes.
So I get more recognition in South Africa than here. I've done the Old Mutual Joburg to Sea almost 4 times, where we ride from Johannesburg all the way to Durban on floating bridges, single tracks. Like when we reach Durban, for almost 3 kilometers, you're riding on top of the ocean, the Indian Ocean.
How are you doing that?
I'm telling you, my pilot John is very talented. He can cruise through that floating bridge.
Wow.
So we cruise through a floating bridge, and some people have fallen off the bridge. But for us, we're able to just cross the bridge without any challenge.
Wow.
We do single tracks, very technical corners, and we finish. And also last year, we got the chance to get the invitation by His Worship, the mayor of Tel Aviv, to do the cycling in Tel Aviv. And these were like 40,000 riders from around the world.
Yes.
And I happen to have been the only one blind. To crown it all, in Israel, we went to Jerusalem, Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and experiencing that hall where Jesus' cross was put.
Yes.
Basically, I laid down all and everything on the cross and the feet of Jesus. And then I went to that table where he was washed, before he was put in the tomb.
Yes.
And then I went to the tomb for around 10 seconds. That was one of the most amazing experience of mine in my life. Then after that, I went to the Wailing Wall, where people were praying and crying and putting around their petitions.
Yes.
And I, for one, I prayed for my country, because that was just before the repeat election.
Yes.
I prayed for our president, I prayed for the opposition leader, and when I saw that handshake of peace, I felt, well, God listened to my prayers. Our country can get united through these powerful prayers at the Wailing Wall and many Kenyans praying around the world.
And amen to that.
Thanks be to God.
Yes. We're going to take a quick break. On that note, we'll be coming back to talk more with Douglas Sidialo. We are remembering the 1998 blast. We'll be right back after these messages. Don't go away.
Thank you very much.